The rules, you have to make sure you're following the rules. This is one of the most common problems I see when we encounter like a family that's already funding a Roth IRA for their kids, or maybe it's a client that we start working with in our planning firm that their parents funded a Roth IRA for them. I think the number one problem we see is that they were not exactly following the rules. You want to avoid breaking these rules that exist with the IRS, because if you're breaking the rules, that's just going to add more stress. And if you get audited, it's going to cause lots of problems, and it'll defeat the whole purpose in the first place. So first rule to think about is you can only fund a Roth IRA for your children up to the level of income that they earned in the particular year. So you can't go above that level. I've seen that happen a lot where people say, I'm funding a Roth IRA for my child. And it's like, well, what's their income? None. Okay, well, you're breaking the rules. You're not following the rules there. You can only fund a Roth IRA up to the level of income that you've earned in a given year. And of course, you can't go above the max for the IRA as well. So they have to be earning money first and foremost. And the money that they're earning has to be legitimate. Like, it has to be like a legitimate job, and the compensation has to be reasonable. Basically, they have to be doing work at a level that you would pay someone else. Like, you have to be paying them at a level, or they have to be earning at a level that anybody else would earn at for the work that they're doing. So that makes it like reasonable from the IRS's standpoint. And I think this is especially important. Like, these rules I'm talking about become especially important if you happen to be the ones paying them. And in particular, if you have a business, because you're on the hook for making sure you're following all these rules. It's important to make sure they're not breaking the rules, but as a business owner or, as a parent paying them, you also have rules you need to follow. So if you're the employer, on top of making sure, that their income is legitimate and that their compensation is reasonable and that they're funding the correct amount based on that, you also have to handle the legal requirements of like whether they're an employee or however you're compensating them. So for example, W-4 is a form you have to file for employees. I-9 is one. You got to have an EIN. You got to send your child, if they're employed, W-2s each year. Make sure all the appropriate taxes are paid. There's a list of requirements you're going to have to handle if you're the employer paying your child. Now, they're a little bit less rigorous if you're hiring them as an independent contractor. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But in that setup, there's also typically a little bit more tax associated with this. So tax-wise, it's typically a little better to have them be an employee. And so but on the flip side, when they're an employee, there's more administrative burden for the employer. So rules are really important. You got to make sure you're following those IRS rules. They can't fund until they have income, and you can't fund more than the income. So you can only fund up to the income or the IRS limits for the IRA. Your child's work that they're doing has to be legitimate or reasonable. Compensation has to be reasonable. And if you're the one paying them, especially if you have a business, you have to make sure you're handling all the legal requirements and checking all the boxes. So those are the big rules to think about.